Okay, it's 1 o'clock now, and I'd like to welcome you, everybody, to the Sustainable Design Methods session. My name is Daniela Pigosso. I'm an associate professor at DTU, the Technical University of Denmark, and I'll be sharing this session together with you today. We have in total 5 different papers, and the way it's going to work is that I'm going to start by introducing each one of the papers. Then the video will be played so that you can watch the presentations. I'd like to encourage you to ask questions in the chat as we watch the presentations so that we can have a discussion in the end between all of the different speakers. Okay, so I'd like to start by introducing the first paper. The title is Are Eco-Design Strategies Implemented in Products? And this is a study on the agreement level of independent observers. The video is presented by Lorenzo Maccioni from the Free University of Bolzano. And Lorenzo has a master's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Florence and a PhD on sustainable energies and technologies from the Free University of Bolzano. Keep in mind and please ask your questions in the chat as we go along, and we will facilitate that in the end. So over to the video from Lorenzo.
Hello everyone, I'm Lorenzo Maccioni, assistant professor at the Free University of Bolzano, and I'm going to present the paper entitled Are Eco-Design Strategies Implemented in Products? A study on the agreement level of independent observers, co-authored by Yuri, Borgianni, Daniela, Pigosso, and Team McAloone. In order to introduce the context of this research, let's try to think on a generic eco-design process. Let me say that when designers try to develop a more sustainable product, they implement a series of eco-design strategies, and these strategies can be referred to minimizing material or energy consumption and so on. Although the implementation of these strategies could be clear in the mind of the designer, this implementation could be difficult to be perceived and valued by consumers. Indeed, in previous studies, the authors have found out people difficulties in recognizing sustainable advantages in products. Therefore, we ask to ourselves, what happens if we ask a sample of eco-design practitioners who will be considered potential consumers with experience in sustainable design to recognize which eco-design strategies are implemented in products? Will they agree on the eco-design strategies implemented in illustrative products? Otherwise said, to what extent do experts share the same understanding of the implementation of eco-design strategies? To do so, we carried out an experiment involving 12 eco-design experts as participants. We exploited 20 product pairs represented by pictures, and in each picture, a baseline product and a product in which some eco-improvements were achieved were shown. Through a Google form questionnaire, we asked the participants to indicate which of the 2 products implements the eco-design strategies listed in the slide. The participants could choose for each eco-design strategy if none of the products implement it, if both the products implement it, or if only one of the 2 implement it, and in this case, they had to indicate which one. Eventually, the evaluations were statistically elaborated through the software R. In particular, the percentage of agreement and the flies kappa were used as indicators of the agreement. The first result that I would like to show is that the flies kappa calculated within the whole answers database shows a fair agreement. Indeed, the maximum agreement emerged between 2 participants is 81%, and the minimum is 61%. Therefore, even among eco-design experts, it was not possible to find substantial agreement on which eco-design strategies a product implements or not among the whole set of eco-design strategies. If we focus on the percentage of implementation, that is the percentage of participants that consider the evaluated principles implemented, it is possible to obtain the graphical representation in the slide. Here it is possible to notice spider diagrams where the more sustainable products are represented in green, while the less sustainable ones in black. It is possible, though, to notice that in each sustainable product, at least one eco-design strategy is recognized as implemented by all the participants. This means that although a product implements many environmental advantages, evaluators will tend to recognize predominantly one. Another interesting result is that the advantages of minimizing material consumption or minimizing energy consumption and optimizing resource renewability and biocompatibility are the strategies that, if implemented, are the most easily recognized. The last result that I would like to discuss is the following. In the histogram, it is possible to notice gray and black bars. The black bars are related to the answers that tend to state that a strategy is not implemented. On the contrary, the gray bars are related to the answers that tend to state that a strategy is implemented. It is possible to notice that a higher level of agreement are reached when eco-design strategies are diffusely perceived as non-implemented. This can be interpreted as the overall ease of identifying the cases in which an eco-design strategy is not implemented, while the perceived presence of an eco-design strategy is more arguable. This proves that the scope of eco-design will benefit from a better understanding of its outreach also within experts and practitioners. Thank you for your kind attention. If you have any question, I will be glad to answer.
Great, so that was the first presentation of the article in our session. And please, if you have questions, remember to add them in the chat so that we can use them for the discussion. And I would like to introduce the second paper and the second speaker. And the paper is actually the reviewer's favorite. So you are top rated in the 10% papers by the reviewer's score. Many congratulations for that, Matilda. An introduction to you before we watch the video. So Matilda Watz is a PhD student from the Department of Strategic Sustainable Development at BTH in Sweden. Her research is in the domain of sustainable product development. We focus on how decision-making in the early design stages can be guided from a sustainability and a value perspective. So now over to Matilda's presentation.
My name is Matilda Watz. I'm a PhD student in Sustainable Product Development at Blekinge Institute of Technology in Sweden, and from the Department of Strategic Sustainable Development. My focus is more specifically on how to analyze how companies currently work with integrating sustainability into requirements and suggest methods, tools, or processes for improving their capabilities to do so, and hence create better products from a sustainability perspective. As defining and prioritizing requirements is very much about a qualitative process where needs of current reality are interpreted with the aim of improving it in some way by providing a solution to a problem of some sort. I am interested in how systems thinking and possibly dynamic modeling can help decision makers in the product innovation process to better understand the implications of sustainability criteria on their more traditional decision base, such as performance and cost requirements. I present a CLD-based workshop, which I designed as a first attempt in this research direction. The method description and guiding templates were developed in an evolutionary prototyping mode, in which a series of 4 workshops were conducted. The workshops were of different size and held in both industry and academic seminars and conferences. The objective of the application of causal loop diagramming was to collectively build system models showing relationships between more traditional diagramming or more traditional requirements on products, such as design criteria and sustainability criteria. And by doing so, the participants were triggered to build a shared idea of how different design aspects of a product could be improved or improve sustainability performance. and also stimulate discussion about trade-offs. The resulting workshop procedure and associated templates are shown in the poster. The workshop started with that the facilitator introduced a fictive design and sustainability challenge and introduced the participants to CLD modeling. Thereafter, participants were guided through the template and encouraged to start discussing the potential relationships between design criteria and sustainability performance aspects, after which they investigated these using reference behavior diagrams. Thereafter, they started to sketch these relationships in a systems view using causal loop diagrams. The facilitating researchers supported the participants, and the workshop was finalized with a group discussion about the method as such and the findings. You can see the work procedure up here. And the templates are shown down here. You can see it contains some instructions, that is an introduction to the design challenge, some space to start drawing links between traditional criteria and sustainability aspects, some space to draw reference behavior diagrams and to start sketching, and also to write down notes and some results. The researchers then collected feedback and the material from these workshops to build continued research upon. And the conclusions were, for instance, that the method helped to visualize complex dependencies and provide a discussion platform in a context that designers are not used to. And a learning by doing approach where users get a quick overview and can learn from each other. However, the workshop method requires a lot of time and needs facilitation, but it can be used as a design and or innovation tool, both in industry and possibly in education as well. And future research can assess the impact on knowledge from using this method, depending on participant background. And a link to the full paper is provided below the video here. And I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback.
Great, so that was the presentation from Matilda. If you have questions to her, please add them in the chat. And congratulations once more, Matilda and Sophie, for the reviewer's favorite paper. Let's move now to the third paper, and this is about the perception of sustainable design integration benefits among industry product development teams. And this is a case study made by Tejaswini from the Dartmouth College in the United States. Teja is a second-year PhD student, and her research focuses on the integration of sustainable design methods and tools in the early stages of product development practice. She's currently partnering with a number of different companies to help them advancing sustainability integration while getting insights as a participant observer. So let's now move forward to Teja's presentation.
Hi, I'm Teja Chatty, and I'm pre-recording a presentation for Design 2020 for the paper titled Perception of Sustainable Design Integration Benefits Among Industry Product Development Teams, a case study, written by me and my co-author, Jeremy Faludi. Our key research questions for this study were: how do employees perceive the impact of incorporating sustainability considerations into their product development practice? And is it possible to shift these perceptions by conducting sustainable design workshops to improve awareness and training? Sustainable design focuses on the integration of environmental considerations in product development. There are many methods and tools that aim to support this integration in unique ways. But as Homans pointed out, there are neither good or bad methods, only methods that are more or less effective under certain circumstances. Our research investigates how providing employees with the awareness and training to apply the right methods in the right circumstances can ease the adoption of sustainable design. Ramis and Kilmer argue that paying attention to the individual employees is important because if they perceive it positively, they can help champion the cause. In our study, we conducted a series of 4 sustainable design workshops at a large industrial tools company that had recently publicly declared their sustainability commitments. We sought to test our hypothesis that the employee perception of the impact of recent sustainability targets would be negative, which could prove to be a critical barrier to the adoption of sustainable practices. We then sought to evaluate the role our workshops played in improving awareness and thereby perception of incorporating sustainability into their practice. The workshops were based on the following 4 sustainable design methods: life cycle assessment, whole system mapping, biomimicry, and the natural step. These methods were chosen for their diversity in approach to sustainable design and were based on recommendations gathered in a past study from professional designers, engineers, and managers working across industry sectors. We conducted pre- and post-workshop surveys, and in the pre-workshop survey, we asked how systematically and how often employees considered sustainability in their practice. We also asked them to rate on a scale of 1 to 10 how they perceived the impact of incorporating sustainability on a set of criteria. In the post-workshop survey, we asked them to rate on the same set of criteria to observe if there had been a shift in perception. We also asked which individual components or steps of a given method they valued and why. The following is the list of criteria that employees rated their perceptions on. This list was compiled through discussions with industry experts on what aspects are critical to the adoption of sustainable design methods into day-to-day practice. This graph represents the overall shift in perception before and after the workshops. We notice an overwhelmingly positive shift in perception of creativity. We also observe significant increase in perceived positive impact in the case of product quality, marketability, and overall business value. These graphs compare the trends across design methods on each of the criteria discussed. What we observed was that in the case of the natural step, there was a significant increase in perceived positive impact on overall business value. And in the case of whole system mapping, there was an increase in perceived positive impact on final product cost and design process cost. Some of the limitations to our study include small sample sizes, which cause us to treat the insights identified as preliminary results to guide future research. There was also a potential for selection bias, where those who felt less positively about the workshops did not fill out the surveys. And the trends identified may or may not hold true in the context of a different industry sector. We are currently working with companies in other sectors to expand our scope, validate our findings, and eliminate these limitations in the future. Thank you.
That's a presentation from Teja in paper number 3. And now we move to paper number 4, Design for Cost and Environment, an ontological analysis and comparison of service representation approaches. And the paper is presented by Marcel Villanueva, which is currently an industrial PhD candidate in Paris at Centrale Supélec and at the Orange Labs. He was awarded an Erasmus Mundus master degree from France, Finland, and Sweden before pursuing his PhD studies. His research interests include complex systems engineering, telecommunications, technology and sustainability, eco-design, and green ICT. It's a quite nice mix of different topics, Marcel. Let's move to his presentation. And again, if you have questions, make sure to add them in the chat so that we can have the discussions afterwards.
Good day, everyone. My name is Marcel Villanueva, and on behalf of my co-authors, I would like to present our paper entitled Design for Cost and Environment, Ontological Analysis and Comparison of Service Representation Approaches.
This investigation is part of a broader research topic that aims to explore new approaches to assess the environmental impact and financial costs of ICT services. Thus, it is interesting for us to represent the architecture of such services so we can map or tag entities and processes that can be related to cost and environmental impact behaviors. As you would like simple representation for ICT service architecture, we also study how tagging service elements can help evaluate financial cost and environmental impacts. This study then aims to compare the ability of different service representation approaches to tag these relevant information by looking at their language, elements, and ontologies.
We then look into 4 service representation approaches. First is service blueprinting, or SBP. So it was first introduced in the 1980s. And here you can notice the distinct layers of interaction that represents physical evidence, customers, and employee actions. To your right, you can see a list of concepts and elements for service blueprinting. Second is process chain network, or PCN. PCN was built on the strength of other flowcharting techniques. It also illustrates the balance between providers and customers by describing the dynamics of their actions and interactions. Similarly, to your right is the list of concepts and elements for PCN. We will use these later for our analysis. Next is BPNM, or Business Process Model Annotation. So BPNM is quite popular. The core concepts of the service representation approach was defined for business analysts and non-technical users. However, the extended concepts of BPNM can be used by workflow engineers and service architects to better draw technical diagrams of a specific service. Likewise, the list of concepts and elements are presented here, right? Lastly, customer journey mapping, or CJM. So the customer journey is not only seen as a way to understand the customer's point of view, it also let us gain insights of the user's experience themselves. So CJM encompasses data collection, qualitative and quantitative data analysis, and the representation of results through visualization. The aim of this analysis is to compare the modeling formalisms of 2 distinct approaches. So first, we extract the concepts and elements from a chosen concept A. Likewise, we do the same for concept B with B's of 1 to B's of n. We then perform a forward and backward analysis of these concepts and tabulate the results. And lastly, we analyze, interpret, and discuss the results in order to draw meaningful conclusions and insights. In addition, there can be 3 different degrees of coverage in a semantic field. It can be total coverage, partial coverage, or no coverage at all. These categories can be helpful later when we do our forward and backward evaluations, and you will see it in the summary diagram. So here is a summary table for the 4 different approaches. We chose SVP as our concept A. And here you can see the different level of coverage for the different semantic fields. We will discuss further our conclusions in the next slide. Therefore, based on the summary table and after analyzing the semantics, here are some of our conclusions. First is that SBP and BPNM has the most coverage among the 4 approaches. This means that the 2 approaches are easily translatable to each other. Next is that monetary and non-monetary tagging feature in PCN can be used to explore related information for financial cost and environmental impact. Third is that BPNM with extended notations, this opens up the opportunity to further integrate context-specific considerations, such as carbon footprinting. Lastly, CJM might not be able to provide cost and environmental impact information, but it serves as a helpful tool in building the diagrams for the other approaches. These findings can be helpful to ICT service providers to be better aware of their spending and ecological responsibility. Thank you very much, and feel free to read their paper for more information. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Marcel. We are now moving to the last presentation of the session, and then we're going to have time for discussions in the end. In the final presentation, the title is Reliable Identification and Selection of Critical Innovation Design Tasks for Process Intensification and Process Engineering. And this is presented by Pavel Livotov from the Offenburg University of Applied Sciences in Germany. Pavel is a professor for design process engineering, and since 2013, he has been a professor for product development and the head of the Laboratory for Product and Process Innovation at the Offenburg University in Germany. We move to the final presentation, and as always, keep active in the chat so that we can have a nice discussion afterwards.
Welcome to our presentation, Reliable Identification and Selection of Critical Innovation Design Task for Process Engineering. In the initial situation analysis, we would like to stress that the innovation in process engineering faces multiple contradictions which appear in the engineering system. And sustainable design of equipment requires a comprehensive and objective identification of all relevant requirements, crucial design problems, and tasks for innovation success. The proposed method is based on the contradiction and synergies analysis to identify problems and innovation tasks, on importance satisfaction analysis to identify the ranking of the tasks, and on the QFD house of quality to visualize the comprehensive interactions between the requirements and technical functions in the process. We would like to illustrate the approach with the help of one example. In the first step, one should analyze contradiction and synergies between the technical functions of the process. For this purpose, one should list all technical functions and to evaluate possible correlations between this function, using -1 if the improvement of the performance of one function leads to the improvement of another one, and -1 if the improvement of the function leads to the changing to the worse of the parameter in the another function. In such way, we can calculate using mathematical equations the synergy and contradiction index which are relevant for the next steps of the approach. In the same way, the contradiction and synergies of the predefined requirements to the process can be also estimated. In the next step, the importance and then the satisfaction with each requirement is estimated by the expert and then calculated by a special approach which leads to the ranking of each requirement as a metric for the selection of the most crucial innovation tasks for process intensification. Based on the obtained information, one can identify the top 10 requirements with high importance, top 10 requirements with high ranking, and top 10 requirements with highest contradiction index. From here, we are able to see the most crucial tasks for process improvement. For example, 5 requirements with the highest ranking are shown in this slide with the corresponding equipment and technical function of the process. These tasks and this equipment should be analyzed and improved in the next idea generation phase. Additionally, the approach estimates automatically the potential secondary impact of any innovation task. For example, the task number 27, reduce water consumption, leads to improvement of the task number 22, but to the worsening of the other three tasks, 24, 25, and 26. This information could be helpful for the engineers in order not to oversee negative secondary impact of their innovation improvement work. Concluding our short presentation, we want to stress that the approach helps to identify objectively and reliably the innovation tasks and to predict possible problems in the innovation process. Its limitation belongs to facts. First, it requires specific expert knowledge and practical experience to define and to evaluate the correlations between the requirements and the functions. And secondly, it doesn't allow to measure and to compare the cause-effect chains in numbers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Now I want to invite all the speakers to join the session with video and audio. I can see we are still missing Pavel and Teja, so you are also welcome to join. And the way we're going to do it is that I'm going to start with an overall question to everybody, and then we're going to answer all of the specific questions that you had in the chat. You can either decide to join with video and camera as well and to ask your question, or I can do that by reading from the chat. So I like to say that while I ask my question, if you have a question for the first and the second papers, then you are also welcome to share your video and audio so that we can have the discussion. But my question is, I've been watching all the presentations very closely, and I was trying to find the connection between all of the 5 different papers. And I think that in one way or the other, all of you are dealing with perception and behavior, either from a designer point of view, and then here you'd say it's mostly Teja and Pavel's paper, from a system perception perspective for Matilda's paper, and also a user perception and perspective for both Lorenzo and Marcel's paper. And my question here to you is, how could we be better in the early design stages to actually take into account user perception and the user behavior so that we can indeed have products and services that will have a higher sustainability performance in the real world? Maybe starting with Yuri from the first paper point of view.
Yeah, thank you, Daniela. I hope you hear me. I can share the video. Something is not working, but if you hear me, please make a sign. Thank you. Thank you. Your question is so smart and insightful that I don't have any answer at hand. And basically, it is a sort of chimera for all designers to have requirements that are then respected throughout the design process by imposing some constraints and indications in the early phases. I might say that maybe it is worth analyzing if it is easier to include from the very beginning some kinds of eco-design strategies or eco-design principle, or there are instead some that are worth including during the design process at the late stages. This is the reflection I can bring forward, but actually I wouldn't be able to answer your question. I apologize for my insufficiency, let me say.
Thanks for that, Yuri. Matilda, any reflections?
About the...
How can we...
It was a really clever... How can we... Can you take the question again?
Sorry. So the question to everybody is, what is the best way for us in the early stages of design to bring the user perception and the user behavior into account so that we can indeed come with more sustainable products across the entire life cycle?
It's a really clever question. It really depends on what type of product and what type of user we will have. If the product is intended to be used as a component even in a larger system, then probably we need to take more into account the actual like technical aspects rather than maybe what it looks like or how the end user perceives the product. That's just reflect. No,
Yeah.
good answer. But at least, I believe bringing actively that question into the discussion to begin with is the first step.
Yeah, that's for sure, and I agree with you. There will be differences if we're talking about business to business or business to consumer companies, of course. Thanks for that, Matilda. Now over to you, Teja. Any reflections in relation to that?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. So that's a great question. And I think what I would think about is who your user is. And in the case of my research, the user is the designers themselves and how we can tailor these sustainable design methods to them. So I think, I think therefore thinking about their perceptions and behaviors plays a key role in enabling adoption, especially in this case where our offering is a sustainable design method. But chiming in with what Matilda was saying, I think it's important to think about the context that the product will be used in. And if it is a technical component, then I guess the user, you would prioritize differently in terms of what factors you consider. But certainly user behaviors are important in certain circumstances.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And then to the service of that, Marcel, what would you say that is the best of the approaches that you have explored to actually look and capture user behavior so that you can understand how to implement that?
Oh, can you hear me first? I think I should ask that. It's good. Okay. So I think my perspective on this very clever question is that because I'm doing my PhD in the industry, in the context of a company, which is also specifically a service provider, like the perspective of the customer, like their behavior and experience really matters a lot when we try to design different digital services that we offer, both as you mentioned, B2B and B2C. So I think my observation would be motivations coming from the management on a level of like organizational level. It really matters, and like the resources and motivation coming from big bosses, if I may say, because I believe that there are a lot of really good design tools and techniques available in the academe or in research, but the industry still has a bit of a slow capture in terms of adapting to these new methods. And so I guess if motivations come from like the big bosses and giving sustainable designers the resources that they need, it will be a very big help.
Yeah, and I think that this top management commitment to sustainable design has been discussed for many, many years as being indeed very key for the implementation and success of the initiative. And now, last but not least, Pavel, could we capture through QFDs the user perception and use that for prioritizing? What are the requirements to go for?
Well, I hope you can hear me and everybody as well.
We can hear you, yes.
In the field, I try to talk only about the field of my recent research or our recent research in the process engineering for chemical industry. And here we can say that there is a huge gap between the industrial companies, engineers developing the processes, and the users. So that is a huge issue because user gets the final product and have no idea how this product has been manufactured or produced. And till now, we are still trying to get a feedback from the end user, and we receive almost nothing, even in the business to business field. And in the field of the pharmaceutical industry, it is much more worse because the end consumer really don't care about the processes, how the tablets and medicine has been produced. And the QFD, the question, well, it's only visualization approach, helping to visualize the interconnection more or less simple. And the whole question in the chat, actually we're trying to mix or to use simple yes, no binary answers of the people to create a more or less objective build picture of the situation, to build the list of the tasks using simple answers, yes, no, or I don't know from the participants. Maybe this approach could be extended to the end user, but the gap at the moment is very high.
Yeah, thanks for that, Pavel. Now we are going to start the round questions according to what you have sent in the chat. Starting with paper number 1, we had questions from Giovanni, Sophie, and Jordan. You are all welcome to share your video and audio in case you want to ask the question in person. Otherwise, I'm pasting them in the chat again so that we can all follow the questions by those 3 people. So let's start with the first question from Giovanni. How many people did you submit your survey to? And how did you choose the right number of people?
So I hope you hear me again. Okay, so the people submitting the survey were 12, and we're not surely the right number of people, but the sample of convenience. The experiment took place, let me say, in a controlled environment. Meaning that people, after a discussion, people were submitted a Google form they should fill in according to availability, and of course, and people were chosen among those with some experience in eco-design, but we don't claim that the right number of people was there. Actually, we looked for correlations and not for significance. And therefore, maybe the number of people is less critical to this respect.
And then Sophie is asking, how are you planning to use the results of this paper? Is that to guide consumers, or is that to support developers?
The results were used actually within a longer and more articulated research that was within the scopes of Lorenzo's PhD thesis. But actually what matters is that what we verified were issues already in people that are supposed to be eco-designers, and when they play the role of users, if they recognize the same eco-design strategies, eco-design principles. From this point of view, this specific study is more aimed at developers rather than consumers in learning eco-design. So we are maybe trying to give developers, designers, some indications on how to make eco-design strategies more apparent and recognizable. But that somehow is also related to what Jordan has asked, but I leave Daniela the pleasure of the question.
Yeah, so, and Jordan is asking whether your results reflect a difficulty in identifying successful eco-design types, or if they indicate that certain types of eco-design are actually more successful.
Thank you also to Jordan, beside Sophie and Giovanni, for their question. In this case, we don't talk about successful eco-design strategies or principle, but recognizable, identifiable, and agreed ones. And there were some eco-design strategies that were more agreed, and I mentioned them with pleasure because they connect very well with what Pavel said. So these people, so designers acting as users, had a good convergence and agreement on minimizing material consumption, minimizing energy during use, and optimizing resources renewability and biocompatibility. A large number of eco-design strategies that regard life cycle aspects and therefore also efforts, resources, or eco criteria during manufacturing were not, or for example, during transportation were not well recognized and agreed. So yes, surely this leads us to say that there are some eco-design strategies that are more recognizable, and if correctly implemented, they might lead to more successful products, unless people say, no, I don't like this product because it is more sustainable. Never know.
Yeah, thanks for that, Yuri. We're gonna get back to you by the end of the discussion as well. Now let's move to paper number 2. And there's one question for you, Matilda, from Jeremy. And the question is about what is the main difference of what you are proposing and the different diagrams that are proposed by the system dynamics maps.
Yes, and thank you for that question. It gives me the opportunity to maybe clarify the purpose of the whole method that we are proposing. And that is not to suggest a different type of system mapping, but to explore how to use this type of mapping in this early phase of product development in this specific context in order to increase the system's thinking capabilities of the decision makers that agree upon, for instance, requirement weights and how to select between different sustainability criteria and so on. So they're not different. It's just how applicable they are and use them that we are exploring in this method.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Matilda. And then we move now to questions to paper number 3 to Teja. And we have questions from Yuri, Sophie, Daniela, and Marina. So if you want to join and ask your questions, you are welcome. I'm also pasting them back here so that we have them together. But maybe we can start with the first question from Yuri. And Teja, were you surprised with this substantial increase of perceived creativity?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we were surprised by how substantial the increase was and how apparently it showed in our survey results. And I guess we were glad that we could get the message across that sustainable design considerations can indeed lead to creativity in different ways, because either they add a constraint to the design or they're an additional factor to consider to design for. So yes, we were surprised, but by how apparent it was in our surveys.
Thanks for that. I can see that you replied for Daniela in the chat, but I'm gonna bring the Sophie's and Marina questions together. So what would you say that needs to be done in order to apply the eco-design tools and methods in a more systematic way? And what would be the next steps then? Should we combine the methods in one way or the other, or maybe create new ones?
Right, that's a great question, and that's something that's been part of our work following these workshops with the company, is to help them integrate these methods into their practice. So I spent the next 3 months at the company trying to help them combine these methods in ways that apply to their workflow. And we've always subscribed to the idea that these methods cannot be treated as single tunnels where you have to go through all of the steps in order to achieve an outcome. We've tried to break them up into individual components and activities, and applying those at the specific components in the workflow, based on what benefits we want it to provide. So that's how we've gone about implementing these methods. But I think it still offers the same value of like a certain component, say system mapping, offers like creativity, broad thinking, and things like that. So that's how we've approached implementation.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Let's now move to paper 4. And there's a question for you, Marcel, from Germany. And the question is whether your systems can help designers or engineers to design product service systems. And if so, how could it be?
Okay, so that's actually a very...
We don't hear you now.
Oh, hello?
Now.
Can you hear me now? Is it okay? All right. So what I was saying was, it was actually a very interesting question. Thank you, Jeremy. So in fact, in the same research lab where I worked in, I have other colleagues working on PSS, or even PSS SOS, Product Service System, System of Systems. And we had some preliminary discussions, but at the moment we haven't really further matured into the topic. So what I may say is, at least in the context of the paper that I presented, the systems, the approaches were quite limited to the context of digital services, specifically services offered by telecommunication providers. And with the current setup that and the results that I had from the paper, it might be limited in the context of the broader PSS area.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thanks for that, Marcel.
You're welcome.
We also teach a lot on product service systems here, and we use some of the methods that you presented as a part of the teaching, and we can see some nice results in doing that as well.
I'm glad to hear that.
And then now moving to paper number 5, we have 2 questions for Pavel, one from Jeremy and the other one from Yuri. So the question from Jeremy is, how time-consuming is this process? How expensive or complex does a product need to be before it's worth using this method that you are proposing?
So I tried to answer already in chat. We applied this approach and developed this especially for the very complex products or processes. Each process, for example, manufacturing process in the chemical industry consists of numerous stations and unit operations. So that's why we need it, because I think it could be possible to apply it to one product or one part of equipment, but we are oriented in our work to give help for the engineers dealing with process intensification of the complete manufacturing lines. I hope I have answered the question or understood it correctly.
Thanks for that. And then there's one more. Have you experienced whether most critical, important, and conflicting functions are often the same, at least from an empirical point of view?
Yes, a very interesting question. Actually, to answer this objectively, we need more case studies than 3 or 4 we have already done. But empirically, I would say I thought first yes, but now, meanwhile, I looked on our data and I see we have such and such cases. And what is also important for those who are interested, we have understood that the companies or engineers define their top top 10 improvement requirements for improvements. And amazingly, that the environmental aspects, ecological aspects, are not on the top of this list, but better to say, we are happy to have them in the bottom, in the first top 10. So we need to see clear difference between the technological, functional requirements or improvement tasks and ecological one. The ecological are definitely not on the monitors of the engineers. That is a bitter truth.
Thank you for that. I think it was really nice questions from the audience. Thanks for sending them as well, and very nice reflections and answers from the panelists. I have a final question before we saying goodbye for now. And we all know that papers and conferences, they are stepping stones for something bigger. That's going to be the youth-made outcome of your research projects. So I'd like to ask for each one of you, what are the next steps that you're going to be taking, and what would be the overall goal that you'll be achieving after those steps are implemented? We have about a minute per participant, and I'd like to start with Yuri and Lorenzo again.
Yeah, so the biggest step was a PhD thesis. So, I mean, the process is somehow completed. Now it has opened up another number of, very large number of questions, one of which is when to implement and to consider eco-design principles, and somehow, hopefully, it will be treated in an upcoming PhD here in Bolzano.
Thanks for that, Yuri. How about you, Matilda? What are the next steps?
One important next step in this research direction is to see if you can get any effect, any actual effect on the competencies and the capabilities in designers and in students. So we're looking into studying
and how
that.
are you planning to measure the effect?
Yes, we will. That's what we are discussing at the moment. It will either be perceived effect or something similar, something in the area of model maturity. Maybe can you use this method to increase the knowledge level about sustainability and so on. But yeah, exactly how that will be done, we haven't figured out yet. We're discussing that
process. Thanks for that, Matilda. You, Teja, next steps in your research?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think, so this study was conducted at a single company that operates in the industrial tools and household hardware sector. And the trends identified in this experiment may or may not hold true in the context of other industry sectors. So the next steps for us are to broaden our scope and reach out to companies in other sectors and see what the generalizability of our findings is. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks. It's often interesting to move cross sectors and cross companies as well, because we become much more clever about what the differences could be out there.
True. Yeah, and we become clever about how we conduct our studies as well. And
as well.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Teja.
Thanks.
Marcel, how about you? You are an industrial PhD at the university and the company. What are the next steps?
Okay, so as for me, in fact, this paper serves as a teaser to the broader research topic. So for the next few semesters, I guess, and also with my stay in the company, we're trying to figure out ways on how we can allocate the designated amounts, for example, of cost or environmental impact within the different service process or processes boxes within the approaches.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Marcel.
You're welcome.
That sounds interesting. Now, Pavel?
Well, I'm talking for my PhD students. Their work has been disrupted by the COVID. In Germany, they have to leave to their countries, to India and Malaysia. Oh, sorry, Indonesia. But now we started a new project, international one, and we also invite everybody who is interested in. We are trying in the field of eco-innovation trying to identify the abstract and natural principles for eco-innovation, not talking about the transfer from the nature to industry, from technology transfer from the nature, but in the identification, the core principles, how specific ecological problems are solved in the nature.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually all.
That
Many
sounds
thanks for the
awesome.
organization of this session, Daniela.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to thank you everybody for a nice discussion and a nice reflection about the different papers. I hope that the conversations continue after we leave the session today. There's also lots of comments from the audience. Thanks a lot for being so active. We are now finishing this session, and I hope to see you all in the plenary that's starting in about 15 minutes. And the topic is what's new with materials. So see you there and see you around in the conference as well. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye, thank you.
Hi, thanks for all the questions.